Caroline Leavitt just crossed a line that should terrify every American who believes in the separation of press and state. We already know the media landscape is completely broken right now. Media ownership has become concentrated in the hands of a few massive corporations that own most of the broadcast, cable, and digital outlets that we consume. Profit moves, corrupted news priorities. Stories get covered based on what drives clicks and revenue, not what communities actually need to know. And it's a mess. And it's laid the groundwork for the weaponization of government communications in the most terrifying way. And we're going to get into it. But first, you need to understand what we just lost. In June, Republicans in the House voted to gut funding for PBS and NPR, the last remnants of journalism that isn't beholden to corporate interests. And PBS and NPR do not have to answer to pharmaceutical companies during an election year. They don't have fossil fuel executives on their boards deciding which climate stories get buried. When there's a crisis, they report what happened, not just what their advertisers want you to believe happened. Journalism funded by the public for the public has never been more important, especially because public media doesn't have fiduciary responsibilities to billionaire shareholders. It's just journalism for journalism's sake. Compare that to today, what we call news. Corporate media treats politics like sports and entertainment. Cable networks owned by defense contractors who somehow never seem too critical of military spending. Local stations controlled by massive conglomerates pushing ideological talking points to millions of viewers. The consolidation of media ownership isn't an accident. When we last kind of did a major study, 6 corporations owned 90% of American media. You don't really get diverse perspectives. You get manufactured consent. But gutting independent journalism is the other half of the strategy. The other half is replacing it with state propaganda so sophisticated that it would make authoritarian regimes take notes. What I'm about to show you isn't coming from some stone fridge website or conspiracy blog. This is the White House press secretary producing content that fundamentally misrepresents or deliberately ignores the role of government communications in a normal democratic society. This looks like something you'd see on state television in those countries we supposedly oppose. While working families are choosing between prescription drugs and rent, while students are drowning in debt, while the climate crisis accelerates, this administration is spending their time and resources in creating the most bizarre propaganda videos. And what you're about to see abandons all of that. When I first showed this to people, they did not believe me that this wasn't an AI deepfake. In a moment, you're going to watch, and I'm going to need you to pay attention to how they present conspiracy theorists as heroic figures, people whose misinformation has now harmed and created immeasurable harm to public health. Now they are rehabilitating these people as champions. Notice how they construct an American reality so disconnected, such an alternative reality. It just is almost too crazy to believe. And while we're at it, I'm going to also ask you to count how many people of color you see in this video, how many working class people you see in this production. Their absence reveals everything we need to know. We've got major police occupations happening across US cities, and now state media apparatus taking shape. Please also take a moment to make sure you're subscribed. You're going to want to keep watching this stuff because you want to know and you need to know how corporate media is operating and exactly what they won't tell you. This explains why they want PBS gone. PBS journalists ask uncomfortable questions about military budgets and corporate subsidiaries. NPR covers wealth inequality and climate stories that corporate media won't touch. They don't want journalism. They want this. Cut to the clip.
200 EOs, a Secretary of War, and a trip to the moon. Let's get into it in this week's MAGA Minute. The president began the week celebrating a historic Labor Day as the entire administration continues to deliver victories for American workers, including tamed inflation in gas prices, historic wage growth, and a renewed focus on apprenticeships and workforce training. The president also hosted the president of Poland this week in the Oval Office, and this week he announced that U.S. Space Command will be relocating to Huntsville, Alabama, creating 30,000 new jobs and hundreds of billions of dollars in investments. The administration's crackdown on crime in Washington, D.C. is working. Total crime is down 18%, violent crime is down 40%, homicides are down 71%, and carjackings are down 81%. Acting NASA Administrator Sean Duffy announced that the U.S. will return to the moon before President Trump leaves office. Very exciting. And HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy traveled to Capitol Hill this week and lit into liberal senators on the pay payroll of Big Pharma, who are partially responsible for the sad state of public health that the Trump administration has inherited. We are going to make America healthy again. And the Office of Management and Budget estimated that President Trump's deregulatory push will save American businesses as much as $5 trillion over the next fiscal year. And the administration released the list of jobs that will qualify for no tax on tips, which includes everyone from digital content creators to golf caddies to electricians and bakers. Check out the list and see if your occupation is on it. And the First Lady hosted the White House Task Force on AI Education at the White House this week. President Trump also signed his 200th executive order since taking office in January, which was an executive order to restore the historic name of the Department of Defense to the Department of War. No president has signed this many EOs this quickly since FDR nearly 100 years ago. This is truly a transformative presidency, as the president continues to deliver results for you, the American people. Make sure you're following us on all social media platforms so you don't miss next week's MAGA Minute.
That was Caroline Leavitt's MAGA Minute. Nearly 3 minutes of pure state propaganda attempting to rehabilitate RFK Jr. as some sort of health champion. The man who has spent years undermining vaccine confidence, promoting debunked theories, and contributing to the preventable disease outbreaks that we're seeing across the country now. He's being positioned as a health policy leader while actual medical professionals are sidelined and quitting. The production value tells you everything about their priorities. They're spending resources on propaganda while cutting funding for real programs that actually serve working families. Notice the aesthetic choices. Very sterile corporate presentation that makes this propaganda look kind of somewhat polished and reasonable. The creepy CapCut audio and transitions, like, I can't get past, but government officials shouldn't be producing unchallenged content and calling it news. In a functioning democracy, there's supposed to be some sort of adversarial relationship between press and power, but no, we're watching the MAGA Minute. Propaganda being distributed directly to U.S. citizens. They're working overtime to permanently alter how Americans consume information about their government. So weird and so intentional. So it's become unchallenged and it's become an official communications outlet. We're fighting for more than just funding for NPR and PBS here, because we don't even have basic principles of how power should be held accountable by independent institutions. Look, I host a rapid response show. I give breaking news and I give political commentary as a host and commentator. I'm very intentional about my positioning because I take journalistic integrity seriously. And right now, this shit has gone completely sideways. Please take a moment to make sure you're subscribed here. Make sure you're following me at I am Lauren P across all social channels so we can keep in touch and stay connected. I love hearing from you. I read all of your comments, and make sure you also share this video to make sure everyone knows what's going on right now.